Let's go for it!
Give me a bottle of anything and a glazed donut. To go.
Hey everybody, it's me, your buddy Dave, the host of the Dark Stuff channel here on YouTube. Thanks a lot for checking out the new video. Today is July 7th, and on this day, July 7th in 1986, none other than David Lee Roth released his debut solo album, Eat 'Em and Smile. His first post-Van Halen full-length album, because he did have, of course, an EP the year before here, Crazy from the Heat, which was all cover songs. It was, California Girls and Just a Gigolo and all that. Really, really great. Van Halen got the jump on him. Their album 5150 came out in March of that year, so about solid 4 or 5 months before Roth's album was out. But he did have the EP, so he technically had the jump on them. I don't know. Purpose of this video is really just to celebrate Eat 'Em and Smile and what a great record it is, not to compare it to 5150, because in my opinion there is no comparison. I don't like Van Hagar. I like David Lee Roth. I liked David Lee Roth and Van Halen even better than all of it, so that's where I stand on it. In the summer of 1986 I was 15, so I was the absolute perfect age for Van Halen, David Lee Roth. I'm like a male in the Midwest in the 1980s, a teenager. I was the target market for Van Halen, no question. I'd been a Van Halen fan since I was like 10 years old, probably the Diver Down era. So when Van Halen, broke up, or the Dave left and that initial version of Van Halen broke up, I didn't know what to think. And when 5150 did come out, and Why Can't This Be Love was the first single, I just remember being extremely disappointed and just not liking it. Thinking it was very, very boring. And I had a good friend of mine who was really, really into it and used to play it all the time and was trying to get me to appreciate it, and I just could not. And here's a little bit of honesty for you. All this time, I used to always blame Sammy Hagar for the reason why I stopped liking Van Halen. It was like, well, it's Van Hagar, and 3/4 of the guys are still there, and then they add this one new element, and now all of a sudden it sucks. And I've always blamed Hagar for that. I now think, after decades later, that it's not necessarily fair to have blamed Sammy Hagar. I came to this realization, I guess, after Hagar was out in the 90s, and they brought in Gary Cherone as the lead singer, and they had that Van Halen 3 album, which is a monstrosity. And I realized it's the same 3 guys there, and they bring in a new singer, and it still stinks. So it wasn't Hagar that was the problem. It's just the fact that Van Halen works best when it's Eddie Van Halen and David Lee Roth. And that was just, I think that at this point should be obvious to almost anyone. I think the main thing that I like about this David Lee Roth Eat 'Em and Smile album, and why I latched onto it so much at the time, was because Roth was intentionally going for the Van Halen sound. One of the things that we've learned over the decades is that Eddie Van Halen, we all knew he was moving into keyboards and to some different types of stuff. That's not a crisis. Jump was a great song. I could skip I'll Wait, but you know what? It's not that bad either. So he was already doing that with Roth. It wasn't the keyboards. It was just the sort of the downer nature of what stuff was happening with Van Halen. And David Lee Roth latched on to the fun side of Van Halen. It was great hard rock with a guitar shredder, Steve Vai in this case, who's a good substitute for Eddie Van Halen. He's not nearly as tasteful in terms of the licks, but he's skilled, a very, very skilled guitar player. At the time, again, me being 15, I just completely fell in with Steve Vai, became a huge fan. I bought the Public Image Limited record he played on. I bought his solo album, Flexible. I even bought a Frank Zappa record or two that he was on, and I ended up selling those because I didn't care for him, but that's another story. The rest of the band was Billy Sheehan on bass, and Greg Bissonette on drums. And Billy Sheehan later went on to a band called Mr. Big, but at the time he'd been in this kind of underground hard rock band called Talus that used to tour with Van Halen. There were all sorts of rumors that Eddie Van Halen tried to recruit Billy Sheehan into Van Halen because they wanted to get rid of Michael Anthony. I don't know the truth of that, but I believe it because there's all these stories about Van Halen always trying to replace Michael Anthony for some reason. I don't know what their hatred of him is or what the issue is, yet he remained all the way in the band through the Hagar era, all of that. That's a side note. Roth retained Ted Templeman as a producer who produced the previous 6 Van Halen records, and it does have more of a live sound, and I think that is, again, going with Van Halen. Another thing that is a similarity between Eat 'Em and Smile and a Van Halen record is the use of cover songs. This is something that drove the other guys in Van Halen crazy, but Roth is big on cover songs. He's an interpreter. They did You're No Good by Linda Ronstadt. They did a bunch of Kinks songs, as we all know. They did Martha and the Vandellas. They've covered all sorts of artists over the years. On this record, we've got a couple of covers. Shy Boy is a cover from Billy Sheehan's band Talus, but the more of the stuff I'm referring to is Tobacco Road, which is a hit in the 60s, and That's Life, which was done by Frank Sinatra. So that's exactly up Dave's alley. Doing a rock and roll version of a Frank Sinatra song is so perfect for him. And Tobacco Road, been covered a million times. It's a great song, and Roth does an excellent version of it. So there's that mix of the kind of the wild hard rock stuff that he does, used with cover tunes. The band does change it up on a couple of songs like Ladies' Night in Buffalo and Big Trouble, are varying tempos and different sort of guitar tones. But for the most part, Roth sticks to the Van Halen formula, and it works, in my opinion. Bump and Grind could have been a Van Halen song. Yankee Rose easily could have been a Van Halen song, and they would have been hits. You know, because right from the get-go, when that David Lee Roth video came out for Yankee Rose, and he's like, I'll have a bottle of anything and a glazed donut to go, or whatever he says, you're just like, yeah, this is what I like. This is what I want. I'm in the minority, apparently, because I looked up sales figures, and Eat 'Em and Smile sold a respectable, like 1.2 million copies. That's platinum. That's very good. But 5150 went 6 times platinum. It hit number 1. Roth's album hit number 4. Again, I never understand mainstream audiences, so I don't understand this either. But it is what it is. I don't think that makes a difference in terms of what I think of the quality of the records. I was totally Team Dave, and I remained that way until they got back together. A couple of fun things to point out about the record. Dave did a Spanish version called Sonrisa Salvaje, or Savage Smile, where all of the songs were done in Spanish. And for all those rock and rolleros out there, this is great. I think it's on the streaming services now. Probably going to be difficult finding a copy of it on vinyl. I did see the tour on that one. Here, hold on. Here's this poster. They got for Eat 'Em and Smile. Here was my ticket stub, September 3rd, 1986. David Lee Roth at the Omaha Civic Auditorium. If you haven't heard it in a while, I strongly recommend throwing it on, pulling the record out, or the CD, or going on Apple Music or Spotify and giving it a spin. It still strongly holds up. The singles, Going Crazy and Yankee Rose, are still, in my opinion, timeless classics, should still be on the radio. So 36 years later, nothing has changed. This is still the best record made after the core 4 of Van Halen split. Better than anything Van Hagar did, and better than anything Roth did after this, in all fairness, to him. I do like Skyscraper, but we're not talking about other records. Anyways, just thought I'd offer up my thoughts on this nice classic record, David Lee Roth. Talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.